Hi there, everyone. I am DDMC941. I am the manager of the Orleans Firebirds here in Out of the Park Baseball 26. Um, just want to take your time here and talk a little bit about the PTCS number 3 and kind of my thoughts on how you might want to approach the draft. I've given us the drafting format info down here on this title card. It is a best of 9 format. We're in 1987 for our run environment. We are not playing with the designated hitter, and we are in Atlanta, Fulton County Stadium, and I have put the stadium modifiers down here as well. And we can kind of see that it is a power heavy, like home run heavy environment with a very slight favorite towards right handed hitting. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how the game kind of reacts to that. For the two draft formats, the daily draft is a double draft with only non-live cards. And if you are in the weekly draft, it is a traditional non-live perfect draft. So it should be pretty interesting. So kind of what are we doing here as far as the this video itself? I kind of want to walk through each of the rounds and kind of explain my thought process on how I would approach it and what I would be looking for in each of the rounds. Some things we have to understand is that the drafts are very random. There are 138 cards you're going to see, and you may not see the most meta cards in each of the tiers. And you know what? That's okay. We're going to build a roster anyway, and we're going to try and win with it. 128 teams in this tournament, someone's going to win it. But we are going to try and get a nice balanced roster built for the environment that we're playing in. But also understanding that in this video, I'm not going to tell you about who to pick. I'm not going to recommend cards to you. But what I am going to try and do is give you a structure. Looking for certain cards in certain drafts makes sense. Because when I look at other drafts in the game, I see that some people are drafting really heavy in certain areas where, in my opinion, they shouldn't be. And so I kind of want to walk you through what my thought process has been when I draft. But we also need to be ready to pivot out of those thoughts, or you need to be ready to pivot out of those thoughts as you're drafting, because I can't draft for you. If I could, I would. But kind of as we delve further into the draft itself, the batting average statistics split between what the game classifies as the modern era for 2010 versus 1987. We can see that offense is up. Hits are up, home runs are up, stolen bases are up. The only thing that's really down are strikeouts. So offense is going to be prevalent in this environment. So bats are going to be important, but so is the pitching. Pitching's going to be a big thing. We need those pitchers to be strong, and that they need to try and limit the damage as best they can. But our offense needs to be present, and our players need to have good defense because of the fact that the ball is going to be put in play a lot. They need to be able to field those ground balls and catch the balls that would get put into the outfield. So the famous era settings slide. 1987 puts us pretty square in the defensive era slot, which is a 5 starting pitcher rotation. These guys are going to be pitching as far as they can, probably 130, 145 being the max for their pitching levels. The pen is probably the more important aspect of the card, of this particular card itself. It says 5 to 6 relievers. I wouldn't bring 5 pitchers in your bullpen here. That seems too low in a best of 9 set. Instead, I would probably think that 6 relievers is probably the lowest I would go. 11 pitchers seems to be kind of the right number for this format, in my opinion. But I wouldn't blame you if you brought a 12th pitcher, just because pitching fatigue is a real thing in this game, and the pitchers burn through their stamina very quickly, and I've lost a lot of tournaments because I've run out of pitching. So a sixth pitcher is probably a good thing. I personally will probably bring an 11th pitcher. If I need to, I may bring a 12th one depending on what my draft gives us. So, the draft cards themselves look pretty straightforward. It'll look something similar to what we can see here for the daily draft. It's 2 cards for every single round, 1 through 13, which is kind of nice. You get to, pick 2 from the slots, 2 perfect cards, which is always nice. The weekly draft is that traditional format, which ends with the 5 cards in the iron round, which is always a lot of fun. In my opinion, I think the double draft, i.e. the daily draft, is probably going to be the harder draft to plan for, because you're going to have to make your lineups and start designing your bullpen a lot earlier than you would probably be thinking about it for this kind of a format in the weekly. For the weekly tournament, as we kind of go through it, you'll see that those bullpen roles get pushed kind of further back than you might think. So let's kind of walk through each of the rounds. And when I talk about a round, I'm talking more about the categorical rounds. So we'll talk about all the diamond rounds in one sitting, all the gold rounds in a sitting, things like that. I'm not going to go through like, in round 10, this is what we're doing. Like, no. No one has that kind of time. So the perfect round itself. This is an important round, obviously. The round that most people enjoy. It can be a very helpful round to kind of define how this draft is going to look for you. You cannot win the tournament based off the card or cards you draw here, but you can definitely lose it. So when you get your 6 cards here, the first thing that I would do is immediately ignore all of the relief pitchers and closers. They will not help you in this particular format. The second thing I would do is I would probably ignore all the catchers in the format, and then I would also try and skip over the starting pitching. The reasoning being is that catchers and starters will not be used as frequently as more traditional bats will be. And I would rather have a strong, versatile defender come in and be able to help clear out areas that maybe the draft kind of doesn't give me. Or I would rather have a big, strong bat or even 2 big bats come in this particular round. There is some preference for maybe right-handed hitting. Again, the stadium format and the stadium modifiers would suggest that righties have a slight advantage. And because of that, I may also try and look for hitters who can hit right-handed pitching much better. Some exceptions to the rules I kind of lay out here would be a starting pitcher who can hit. Because it's a no DH environment, those starting pitchers are going to be taking probably 2 or 3 at-bats throughout the game. And so if you can get a starting pitcher who can kind of pull his weight in the lineup, that's a good thing. So that Hilton Smith card would be a very nice pickup if you're in the daily draft. That would definitely be worthy of one of the 2 slots. If you're in the weekly, I wouldn't have an issue with you picking that as your perfect either. It may depend on what else is in the pool for you, but yeah. The daily draft, you get to pick 2 perfect cards, which is, fabulous. You may, if you're in the daily, choose to pick up a starter here. I wouldn't blame you if you did. A lot of these perfect starters are good. That's why they're a perfect card. I would not do it because I felt obligated to do it. Just because that 101 Randy Johnson is in my card pool does not mean I'm going to pick him. I shouldn't feel obligated to have to draft him just because he is like the highest ranked pitcher in the game. Don't feel obligated to do that. Draft the best players that will fit the kind of mold that you're trying to shoot for in this particular tournament. When we shift into Diamond, same rules still kind of apply here. I'm not looking at relief pitchers, and I'm not trying to pick up a catcher here within reason. But in the Diamond rounds, this is when I'm going to start trying to draft a starting pitcher. In a format where those starting pitchers are going to be important, I may try and draft one in this round. And as for the rest of the lineup, I'm I'm open book. It's open season. Like, anything is available here. And because we'll probably have maybe 2 or 3 extra, kind of real players in our lineups, especially in the daily format, um, you can kind of get the start to platoon players a little bit. Um, and so you can kind of start to do that here in the diamond round. If you have drawn a card that's really heavy against right-handed hitting, but he can't hit lefties, you may need to take a note about that. And so that way later in your draft, maybe in the iron or in the gold rounds, to draft a complementary player for him. And as always, as you're drafting starting pitchers, if you're kind of stuck between 2 pitchers to draft, take a look at their hitting ratings. They may have a decent enough bat, and if they can hit, that might be a turning point. That might be the tiebreaker for you, and kind of help you kind of, say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to draft this guy, because if he can get a hit in his start, that's, might be the big difference maker. But the diamond round is a pretty straightforward round. Not a whole lot going on there. Complementary players to the ones you drafted in the perfect round, and kind of help set up the gold round. Speaking of which, the gold round, in my opinion, is like the most important round. This is the meat and potatoes of the whole thing. This is where your draft is really going to set up everything. Still, don't look at the relievers. We're not playing with them yet. But it's still open season on anything. Catchers are now available to us. We can spend more time with them and get to know them a little better. If you are in the daily draft, by the time you are finished with your 3 gold rounds, I would like to see that you have drafted at least 4 starting pitchers by this point. So at the end of the gold round, you have drafted 2, 4, 6, like 12 cards. I would like to see about a third of your cards be starting pitching. At least a third of them be starting pitchers. And then for the rest of the cards, you probably want to address your catcher, shortstop, center field trio. That up the middle defense is going to be important. You want to have a strong defensive shortstop. Your center fielder needs to be able to move freely in the outfield. Catching defense, i.e. that framing rating, in my opinion, the further back we go in the eras, catcher defense, while important, I am not discrediting the importance of catcher defense, we can sacrifice just a little bit of it, just a little bit of it, for a bat. And so we can get a strong hitting catcher, and he's a medium level defender. That's okay. I won't, I won't scoff at that. That's okay for me. That's going to work out in the long run, I think. If you're in the weekly draft, before you get out of those gold rounds, the 1, 2, 3, the 6, 9 players that you will have drafted by this point, I would say probably about a third of them need to be your starting pitching. Probably a third, 3, 4 of them need to be starting pitchers. Starting pitching, big thing in these early rounds. We want to have a strong rotation going into this tournament. These guys need to be high stamina, be ready to play. And then I would also have addressed at least 2 of those big 3. A good catcher in the gold round wouldn't kill you, as well as maybe a decent shortstop or a center fielder. Any 2 of those 3 would be perfectly acceptable here in the weekly. But the gold round, super important round. Take all the time you need in this round. I'm pretty sure the PTCS draft clock is about 30 minutes. Take your time in the gold rounds. Take all the time that you need here, because this is the round that, in my opinion, is going to kind of define what you do, or how deep you'll go in this tournament. But once you're done in the gold rounds, we move into silver. Silver is now open season on everything. Relievers we can start looking at if that's what you're into. But we're also now kind of thinking about, what is our team missing? What is missing from this team? I have this really amazing diamond player, and he can really hit, right-handed pitching, but he can't hit lefties to save his soul. Well, it's a good thing. Oh wow, I just found this, silver card who can dominate left-handed pitching, and he just so happens to play the same position as this diamond card. Well, guess what? You just found a platoon partner for him. So you want to find some platoons. If you can, you've got the luxury to do so. And because this is a format where you're going to have a few more bats than you do pitchers, you do have the luxury to platoon a handful of positions, which should be kind of your thought process. I also think that during the silver round, especially if you're in the daily draft, you may want to also start thinking about defensive replacements. Just kind of as that game develops, you want to be able to put strong defenders out there to kind of help close that game out and stop those late inning errors from happening. So some thoughts on that. For the daily draft, before you are done, that rotation has to be done. We are not drafting rotation members out of bronze or the iron round. That is not happening. We're not going to allow that to happen. I would say the primary lineup is done. Like, you can fill out most of your lineup and be fairly well content with it before you are done in silver. And I would also have probably started to draft some bullpen pieces here. Because it's a double draft, everything moves up in terms of how quickly you need to start addressing it. So your bullpen, you should start early in the daily draft. Because it's a double, I would probably draft maybe 2 or 3 relievers in quotation marks, because in reality we're really drafting starters. I would also, in this round, be thinking about catchers and keeping an eye on that catching number. I've had many drafts where that catching number pops the 10th catcher in the silver round, and so you do need to draft that catcher as soon as you can. And so you do need to think about where that catcher's going to live, because sometimes he does pop early. For the weekly draft, when you are out of your silver rounds, same thing with the daily draft, that rotation needs to be done. Your core 3 needs to be done, and I would say you want to probably get a bullpen pitcher. I would probably draft maybe 2 starting pitchers out of this round, if not 3, and dedicate one of them as like your big bullpen arm, a guy who can come in and help close that game with some reliability. And again, remember, as we're drafting these pitchers, if you can find a pitcher that can hit, that's a big bonus, especially if they're going to be a part of your rotation. We want those hitting pitchers. So silver round, very important for helping to build your bench and kind of start your platoons for the daily round. For the weekly, this is kind of still wrapping up your starting rotation and finishing out your lineup. As we transition into bronze, bronze is all about the bench and the bullpen, really for both sides. For daily draft, we want to make sure that depth chart is done before we leave the bronze round. We are not going into the iron round missing a shortstop or missing a center fielder. Like, everyone needs to have their backup ready before we go in there, and you need to know what you're missing before you go into the iron round. And if you still haven't popped like that last catcher, or you're still looking for a good catcher, you're going to want to draft him here in the bronze round. I don't have an issue with you drafting a high defensive catcher in the bronze round, but again, I think you can sacrifice some catcher defense for offense in this particular environment. So your bullpen needs to be wrapped up, depth chart should be done, and that second catcher should be done here in the bronze. If you are a weekly drafter, your bronze round is going to be spent wrapping up your bullpen. You're going to draft probably the rest of your bullpen. If you drafted one iron pitcher, or one silver pitcher in the previous slot, you're probably going to draft. You really should probably draft probably three bronze pitchers in these rounds. You also need to grab your catcher. We need to figure out any bench pieces that are missing. You probably aren't going to have a super amazing bench in terms of your offense, but it's a draft of your own making, because that's assuming that you dedicated a ton of your time in silver and in gold to building that lineup. And we need to start thinking about what our depth chart's going to look like if you're in the weekly. The last round, which is the iron round, this is final pieces of the puzzle. For daily draft, you only get 2 out of those 12 cards. If your bullpen is set, you already have 11 pitchers, and you are content with your depth chart, like everyone has a backup, and you have your platoon set and ready to go, you are free to draft whoever you'd like. And we are going to try and not use them as much as humanly possible. You may draft a 12th pitcher here if you'd like, and no one would blame you. You are welcome to draft an iron bat. If you do that, I highly recommend that you draft a batter who can play multiple positions and kind of put him in that secondary utility slot. Because as the tournament goes on, he will probably need to play in games and probably start games, and help kind of relieve not only your backups but your primaries as well. And also just make sure that you have that second catcher. Super important. It's super embarrassing to go into a PTCS without drafting that second catcher. Keep a note of it write it on a big post-it note on your screen, and just like second catcher, check for that 10th catcher and draft him if you haven't drafted a second catcher. For the weekly draft, your iron round, you get to draft 5 cards. You get to draft like half of the cards that's in there. So you're wrapping up your depth chart here. We are grabbing a couple of iron pitchers to round out our bullpen. We're hoping that maybe that catcher has stayed out of the way and is now available to us here in that iron round. And so we can pick him up here, and maybe a couple of iron pitchers and then a couple of iron hitters to help round out our bullpen. And suddenly we have not the worst looking roster ever in the history of time. But the iron round is a pretty important round, and it does kind of help us wrap up everything nice and tight. I think it's less important for the daily draft, just because by the time you get there, your roster's pretty complete. The weekly draft, the iron round is way more important, just because you don't really have a depth chart by the time you get there, and or you're missing pieces of your bullpen. So the iron round, it depends on which format you're in terms of its importance. But those are the rounds. All in all, I think that structure should really help you. So kind of a little bit of a recap of kind of what we talked a little bit about of everything. Each round is important. It has its uses. At the end of each round, you kind of need to know where you're standing and kind of what you're missing. Don't just be clicking random cards and praying that it fits. Take your time with it. Build it. And understand that this particular format and this particular ballpark are built for power. So, make sure your guys can hit with some authority. Platooning is going to be a thing. Again, you do have the luxury of having a couple extra batters in your lineup, or in your depth chart, and so you can platoon here. I would try and platoon out of the silver and bronze rounds. I wouldn't dedicate like 2 golds in a platoon, because that just kind of seems like a waste of a roster slot to me. Your bullpen, you can build it later. It's way later if you're in the weekly, just because you do have that luxury of really picking 5 cards in the iron round if you really want to, dedicate your strong rounds to bats and benches. But if you're in the daily, you really have to start drafting early, because your roster finishes really much earlier than the weekly draft does. just for kind of the giggles, I kind of took these instructions and I gave them to a chat GPT and kind of had him kind of talk about what to do on each round. I don't disagree with anything really that he said here, or if I did, I removed it and made some smaller edits. But all in all, I don't really disagree with anything that he's marked out in here as far as what to do or what not to do. But all in all, the draft is yours. You're going to have fun with it. Don't worry about how, bad your draft is. In my opinion, I think the game gives every player the 138 cards they need to win. You just have to pick the right cards. And I think it's going to be a really fun tournament. I hope you all have, a really good time, and I'll see you all in there.